Well, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us today. My name is Dave Bryant, and I'm the Vice President of Sales at One Workplace, and I'll be our moderator today. Today is the first of 3 presentations from our inaugural Wonder Grant program. We're really excited for today, and we couldn't wait for it to get here. Now, prior to our shelter in place, we had hoped to have you join us for all 3 presentations on one evening in our newly renovated Santa Clara space. So just imagine yourself with a big plate of food and a nice drink in your hand. You've just spent some time networking, meeting some new folks, and you're settling in for what is sure to be an invigorating evening. So we are doing the best that we can and making lemonade out of lemons. And this format actually will allow more people to attend. We will be spreading the other 2 presentations over the next few weeks and hope you plan to attend those as well. So please feel free to share the invite with your friends and colleagues as well as today's presentation. As for the agenda today, we've got an exciting announcement to share with you right out of the gate, and we can't wait to tell you about it. Followed by that will be our first presentation from Holly Peterson-Snyder, and I think that you're going to really appreciate their insights and research. We're going to have a little brief discussion after the presentation, and then the Q&A portion of today will probably linger a little past noon. So we would enjoy you, or we would invite you to join us for the Q&A session, even if it goes past noon. You can put the Q&A in your questions for the Q&A in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and this will be recorded. So if you do have to leave right at noon, you'll be able to come back, listen in, and join in on the rest of the Q&A at a later time. So what is Wonder Grant? A lot of you got an invite. You're coming to this presentation. There's a plethora of webinars, and so you happened upon this one because maybe you saw there was something insightful here, but you're really not quite sure what Wonder Grant is. Well, and how did we actually get here? Well, the landscape of our industry has changed, and the way that we engage with our clients has changed. We know that there is a deep need for thought leadership relative to the workplace. As thought leaders ourselves, we wondered, how can we help elevate the role of architects and designers and maybe be a catalyst for thought leadership from this community, which is more important now more than ever? So we had a crazy idea. What if One Workplace is here to truly support and drive value to the A&D community? Perhaps we should put our money where our mouth is and fund research that will allow firms to present their points of view and research on a platform that celebrates their own thought leadership, not just for themselves, but for the betterment of the entire workplace community. Today showcases the first of 3 firms who are awarded $20,000 grants as part of our Wonder Grant program. At One Workplace, we understand that the future is dependent on what we learn now, and continuous learning and understanding of workplace design is key to a robust tomorrow. I would now like to invite Amy Neva to share the big announcement and introduce our first presenters. Amy is our Market Development Manager, who is essentially our tip of the spear to the architecture and design community and has been with each of these firms every step of the way. Amy, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Dave. We are so excited to be continuing the Wonder Grant program for 2020. We truly treasure our partnership with the A&D community and look forward to sharing an amazing journey of exploration and research. This year, One Workplace has allocated over $100,000 for grants that look at creative drivers that impact the interiors industry. We expanded the geography of the program for applicants. Your office needs to be based in one of the following counties: Santa Clara, Alameda, San Francisco, Marin, Solano, San Mateo, Contra Costa, or Sacramento. For a couple key dates to make note of, the applications and proposals are due on Wednesday, July 22nd. On July 29th, We will have a virtual celebration with all submitting applicants where you'll present your research idea in a 2 to 3 minute presentation. No PowerPoint required, just a quick synopsis of your idea. Then on August 12th, we will announce the winners. And just like last year, each team that completes a submission will receive a $750 stipend to cover your costs. To find more information, feel free to go to our website or take a look at the website link attached. We're so proud of our A&D community and can't wait to work with all of you again this year. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce HPS. HPS is a 30-person firm located in Sunnyvale with a focus on healthcare, workspace, civic engagement, amenity space, and sustainability. They have a strong commitment to environmentally friendly design and chose as their area of investigation to better understand the impact of interior material selection on embodied carbon in the built environment. While conducting a tremendous amount of research, they identified strategies and resources to assist designers in understanding how to assess the impact of their team of embodied carbon and which tools can provide information on material selection. Today, 2 people from their team, Sharon Refvem and Nick Kaspereen, will be presenting. Let me give you a brief intro. Sharon is a senior associate at HPS, where she is the director of Sustainability Resource Group and serves as sustainability lead on many of the firm's projects. She has dedicated her career to exploring and implementing sustainable solutions for the built environment and is very active in various professional organizations, including as vice chair of AIA's California Committee on the Environment. He is a fellow in the AIA and LEED. Nick is a sustainability research assistant at HPS and teaching assistant at San Jose State, where they are completing a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Interior Design. Nick's passion for design and the environment led them to focus on environmental solutions for design to help improve the built environment while addressing the looming impacts of climate change. And I want to wish congratulations to Nick. They just graduated from San Jose State. Nick and Sharon, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Dave and Amy, for that introduction. And thanks to those of you that are signed in today. This is great. We're presenting this work that we did, and the first thing we want to do is to thank One Workplace for their generous offer. Somebody in control of the slides? Nick, we need somebody there moving the slides forward. There we go. So we want to thank One Workplace for this generous opportunity to research something and something that we're very interested in. And as our team at HPS looked at this opportunity, we decided that we wanted to address something that was that met the intersection of interior design and sustainability. And we thought about the numerous things that we could think about and research, and we started to narrow it down, and we finally decided that carbon was the thing that we needed to look at. And so that's the proposal that we made. And so the next question is, well, why is carbon a problem and how is that related to interior design? So what we did was look at carbon, and as a kind of a background for everyone that may not be familiar with it, about 40% of the carbon in the built environment is from, or in the world is from the built environment. Now, part of that is building operations. So over time, how much carbon and energy is used in a building. And we've been doing great things with improving the efficiencies of our building both with energy efficiency and envelope improvements and so on. And the embodied carbon is actually the carbon that's embedded in the material itself that's used for the construction. And that's taking on a larger and larger percentage of that pie as the operational carbon is being addressed. So that becomes an important piece. So in this example, this is a conceptual timeline of embodied carbon directly drawn from LMN Architects in Seattle. This is a conceptual office building that has a 60-year lifespan. And we can see that the immediate impact of the structure is on the books from day one. So the carbon that's embedded in that material is in the building from day one. Likewise with the envelope. And then we see that the interior TI part of it is also part of that initial build out. But what we don't often recognize is that there's a churn in the tenant improvement work that usually around 15 years will eventually, while interiors get changed out and business needs change, that this starts to build up. And the tenant improvement impact is actually starting to outpace the initial carbon impact of the building. And what we also learned during our research is that in places like San Francisco, this churn doesn't happen necessarily at a 15-year interval. Rather, it can happen as rapidly as a 2 to 5 year interval. And we can see that even at a 5-year interval, it literally takes the carbon impact of the tenant improvements off the chart. If we look at it another way and compare it to the operational and material embodied carbon, we know at the end of a lifetime of a building, in this case, a 100-year example from Kieran Timberlake, that the operational cost of carbon, at least at today's building standards, is indeed greater than the material. However, at the beginning of a building process, the very beginning of a building's life, the material embodied carbon is almost 100% of the carbon impact of that product, of that building. And why is this important? Well, we have approximately the next 10, maybe 30 years to get this thing right. And if we don't make big strides in the next 10 to 30 years, we're going to be in big trouble. And I'd say 10 years is even more important. But you can see at 30 years here in this example that the materials, the embodied carbon of this product is still at a 80% level, theoretically, over the actual impact of the operational carbon. So we can see what this really says is there's a real opportunity to make a difference by choosing materials that are lower in carbon. So how do we do that? How do we figure out what material is lower in carbon? Next. Oops, sorry. We can also see that there's a huge opportunity available if we take existing buildings, places where the embodied carbon of the structure and the envelope have already been paid, and we use those to minimize the amount of embodied carbon in a project. So this begins to illustrate how existing building reuse is a really important strategy in reduced carbon in the environment. Next. So how do we do that? We need to know the life cycle of an individual building product to understand what the carbon inputs are from extraction to transportation, manufacture, more transportation, installation in the building, and eventually the end of life, whether that is to the landfill or through the recycling process. Well, that's a lot of information. How do we tie that to interior design? Well, fortunately, there's a thing called environmental product declarations, a third-party certification system that's kind of like a nutritional label on food that tells you what the impact is of a particular product on soil or energy, water, and so on, and waste generation. And if we take these EPDs, these environmental product declarations as a whole for a building, and we look at the cumulative effect of all of the products that we select for our buildings, we can find out a whole building life cycle analysis. Next. So how do we insert this complex information into the already complex design process? What we were actually looking for were promising bridges that would allow us to help interior designers incorporate this kind of complex information in a way that could be meaningful and useful to them. Next. So our goals were to provide an entry point for interior designers and other stakeholders, feedback to LCA software providers, encourage manufacturers to participate in this LCA and EPD data, and to distill a set of next steps and best practices that were accessible. Next. We were very fortunate in the research that we did to have a lot of experts that we could reach out to, including interior designers, manufacturers, topic experts, and of course, software developers. Each of them were interviewed, and their information was so useful that we included it as an appendix, the transcripts of those interviews as appendices to our report itself, along with an outline of the challenges, strategies, and solutions that we came up with. And of course, a set of possible next steps for interior designers to choose from. Now, I have to give you a spoiler alert. In the late 90s, I went with a client to Portland, Oregon to a life cycle analysis conference. And after 2 days of expert programming and talks, somebody raised their hand at the closing and asked, okay, well, this has all been great, but where do I get a copy of the list of products that are good, the ones that have been checked out and that I can use on my project? Well, I'm sorry to say that the answer then and now is the same. There is no list. This is a complex problem, and we are looking at incremental steps for how to get forward with it, and we hope that some of the things that we've come up with will be helpful to you. And so the next, Nick will be sharing with you some of the outcomes of our report, and we will be available for questions afterwards, and I hope you'll take a look at the full report as well. Thank you. Nick?
Thank you, Sharon. I'm so excited to finally be together, even though it is through video, to talk about such a critical, complex, but necessary approach to sustainability. I want to start by telling you a story of why I'm excited to do this work. While enrolled in an environmental studies program at De Anza Community College, I was encouraged by one of my professors to meld my love for the environment with my natural interest in design. When I transferred to San Jose State, one of my professors asked my cohort to describe our dream jobs. It was at that moment that I was able to express what I had envisioned years earlier, combining interior design and sustainability in a meaningful way. Since being awarded the ONEder grant and contributing to this research at HPS, I've been afforded unique opportunities for interviewing experts in the field of architecture and design. It is an honor to be in a position to engage with experts so critical to our research. Architects and designers alike have contributed countless hours of groundbreaking research to ensure best practices, and we should continue to explore, even though there might be challenges ahead. This research includes more than a dozen interviews with multidisciplinary stakeholders, exposing barriers related to incorporation of LCA as a design criterion. I want to highlight and talk about 3 challenges that came up most in our interviews. Inaction. The first challenge is inaction. You cannot see inaction, but it can have lasting and harmful effects that gradually happen over time. There's little incentive to incorporate LCA considerations into practice because it's not a mandatory requirement for design or construction. So how should we take action or get others to take action as well? Complexity. Secondly, one of the largest barriers to making an accessible LCA design tool is the complexity of the underlying data that must be reconciled and presented in a convenient and user-friendly format. If the results of a life cycle analysis are indecipherable to an average design professional or challenging to access or interpret, the uptake will be minimal. So how can we find ways to simplify the tracking of carbon in our designs? Education. The scientific nature of the core LCA methodology makes it difficult to learn and use in its rawest form. This problem is exacerbated by the limited amount of fundamental education dedicated to environmental impacts of material choices in most universities' design programs. As students and educators, we need to encourage and push for change. Sharon and I had the chance to speak as guest lecturers for a material class in the interior design department this past spring semester at San Jose State. The students were engaged and eager to learn how they could reshape the way we design. Strategies and solutions. With the help of our experts and the research, HPS put together a list of 36 interventions, answers to challenges that can be adopted individually or in combination with others. Our goal here was to provide an entry point for interior designers, in particular, somewhere to start. I want to review 5 of the strategies and solutions that we find the most attainable. Join or convene a group. Jen Chin, an interior designer with Elman Architects in Seattle, brought together her network of local designers to brainstorm best practices, inform the material selection process, and streamline the documentation requirements for third-party certification. By using the firm's market leverage, she was able to take these steps, ensuring that material libraries can contribute to certification goals, facilitate necessary research, and put LCA into practice in a broader context than just her own firm. Prioritizing high-impact materials. Kirsten Ritchie of Gensler assessed the relative quantity of high-impact design components, starting with the optimization of materials, emphasized here in the color blocks. We see a drastic change in size with several materials, mainly carpet, wallboard, and ceiling tiles. We can also notice that the paint block did not change much in size, which tells us we have some work to do in this area. The color blocks are allowing designers to prioritize their efforts and minimize time spent on research if time or fees are an issue by focusing on high impact components. Picking the best option. Kirsten's carpet tile reveals a comparison of the global warming potential, also known as GWP, for some of the top carpet tile options with verified sustainability attributes. Even within this curated selection, there's a 5-fold difference between the best GWP option and the worst. Although this is only one of several environmental measures that can be evaluated and compared, it is considered the category with the most reliable data. In this example, it does not include all of the better carpet options, nor does it represent the full range of results for carpet tiles. There are options for which the results would be off the charts. Waste diversion. Prioritizing waste diversion through all aspects of product development, construction documents, and policy is another way to change how we practice. Eden Bruckman shows us the San Francisco Department of the Environment's example. Strategies for minimizing landfill include designing for reuse by considered material selection and detailing, mandating best practices in construction documents, and identifying and utilizing take-back programs. There are a lot out there and we should use them as much as we can. Champions. Lastly, as we went through this process, we discovered so many champions along the way. For example, Jen Chin started to seek out a new way to practice because it was the right thing to do. Discover your passion and be the champion for it. Through personal focus and agility relative to best practices, an individual can lead the way in a firm or community organization, while the group can have a strong impact on particular outcomes through advocacy or other means. Never underestimate the power of a champion. Although there are barriers to bridging LCA and designers, we hope this research will help people find a place to start. Winston Churchill once said, "Perfection is the enemy of progress." This way of thinking allowed us to seek the current needs of the industry and work toward strategies and solutions to experience conscious design and building decisions currently and moving forward. I'm very grateful that HPS has afforded me this purposeful learning and practice experience. With each interview, I had the privilege of hearing the progress and the setbacks of the individual architect, designer, manufacturer, and software maker working toward a sustainable choice in materials. The largest takeaway for me was realizing the importance of advocating for change on all levels of awareness. We would like to leave you with a quote by Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that never has." Thank you.
That was an incredible presentation. Thank you guys for sharing. Want you to put any questions and answers that you have down in the Q&A block below. And as you're coming up with your questions, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions or start a little bit of a conversation. You know, originally, as I said, we were all going to be in Santa Clara. We were going to be at one workplace. It was going to be a great evening. We're all going to invite our friends and family and have a good evening. And obviously, things changed in early March for all of us, right? And so there's a lot of reports about how the environmental and the carbon impact on the environment has changed just because most of us aren't driving to an office now. And so we're certainly seeing the benefits of impact of COVID relative to the general environment because we're not commuting the way that we did. Is there anything through looking through that lens for you two? Is there anything that is either emphasized or really kind of comes to top of mind? You've certainly had some time to think about this, that since COVID and since this pandemic, it emphasizes, or does it change any of the work that you did relative to what you've presented today, and what might we be what might we be thinking about? What might you be thinking about relative to how this pandemic has influenced your point of view on this research?
Well, I don't know that it's changed any of the research that we did, but I do see it as one of the extremely few silver linings to this pandemic, that we are able to see that the world can change and that there can be an impact when humans change their behavior. And so while it's not the degree of change that we need to see in carbon reduction to counter climate change, we are seeing a significant reduction during this time, as you said, because we are not commuting to work, which is one of the big contributors. And I think that the whole way that we do our work and the transition of the workplace itself as we move forward through and out of this pandemic will hopefully change to the positive for things related to carbon and climate change.
That's great. Yeah, I think it certainly has brought an emphasis, or at least it's highlighted, I think, the need for it for sure. I think a lot of us have felt the impact. Just even looking out our windows, we don't see as much smog as we used to because there's not as many planes flying in. Unfortunately, the economy has been impacted, but I hope we can take some cues from the environmental impact of what's happened. We did receive a question that's really focused around the fast track of projects. So we're seeing some projects, at least in normal times, some projects are being fast tracked. There's a desire to quickly activate a space. Leases are turned over, buildings are bought, and kind of you're running against the clock from the time you start a project to getting first day of business. Are there any processes or models that you might put in place that would allow to get still a sustainable result against a fast track project?
Yes, I think that even though a general global list doesn't exist, there's no reason why a firm can't pick the biggest impact products or a set of products that they use regularly, whether that's paint or gypboard or whatever, and figure out through concentrated research which the best options are and put those directly into the specifications as the baseline requirements. And by doing that, you do the research one time and you're able to present it in these fast track ways to those kind of projects.
Excellent. Nick, you are a forward-thinking individual, and I think when we first did the Wonder Grant and we had the presentations of the thoughts and ideas, I remember the evening you guys showed a picture of it, where those who were presenting for a grant, and you really kind of took the evening because of your passion, and you're a forward thinker, and I'll never forget, like, it was like just gold floating in the air when you shared what you had to think about. We've got a question that I'm going to throw your way because I feel like you're an outside the box thinker, and it's really around there's a lot of things that we can do to reduce carbon. Is there a way to, have you thought about, or are there ways that are being considered of things that can reverse it? In other words, are there machines or devices that can eat carbon and a way to reverse it in a way? I mean, you're kind of thinking outside, and we're not going to all put you on the spot that you're going to absolutely know the answer, but I feel like if anybody's going to think about a way or be aware of anything, and Sharon, I certainly invite you to give your insights as well, but is there anything that can be done to reverse that?
Well, I remember just talking to so many experts, and one that sticks out in my mind is when I had a conversation with Eden Bruckman, and she was telling me all these great and fascinating things that are happening out there. And I'm like, I didn't know about this, and she's just enlightening me. And there was a company, and I can't pick it off my head, but I believe it's in the report, that was finding ways of how to reduce carbon or some type of material that was out there that would eat it or something like that. But there's definitely people out there thinking about this. We just have to dig for it. We just have to talk about it more so people can hear about it.
I know one of the things that we think about relative to furnishings is how is there a renewed life of something afterwards, not just passing it down, if you will, but renewing and revitalizing it and putting it back into a new useful life, and with as little of remanufacturing and reconditioning as possible. I know it's something that a lot of people are thinking about. I did, you know, this is a community, right? We started Wonder Grant not so that individual firms could only come up with points of view on their own, but also for the betterment of the community. And so I guess we're all on this call, and we all now have a responsibility because we learned about something maybe we didn't know, or we kind of pushed down, and it was kind of in the back of our minds, and now it's in the front of our thinking. What are the next steps? One of the questions is, what are the next steps of getting the evaluation, the rating tools in the hands of designers? Because I believe that this webinar is really consistent of a group of people who do care and who want to actively participate in the next steps. But what are the next steps, and how does that evaluation and rating tool get in the hands of designers?
Well, we're working with some developers, and they are working on these tools, and they're available, especially the EC3 tool, which is available through a group of the Carbon, what's the official name, Nick? Carbon Coalition. And this tool is available online, and as they build their database, you can access that for free and start to understand between a couple of different options what your best choices are. Nick and I were invited to give a class at San Jose State, and we used EC3 and Tally, showed the students how to use them in one lecture period, and we gave them an assignment. They had to pick 2 options for 3 different types of materials, and they had to use Tally, EC3, and transparency.com and a couple of other resources to find options for their final projects. And then they had to explain why they picked one or the other of each of those products. So really what we're hoping for through the report is kind of an entry point for people to understand what simple steps they can take to really start using those tools and to make progress. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I think it does. The thing that was really, I really like to see about this whole body of work that you did is that you didn't depend on just professional educators, but you reached out to your own community. I mean, talk about what it was like for you to engage. I mean, you mentioned LMN and you mentioned Gensler, and you're reaching out to other firms. I mean, I know that this is a passion for you. What was that engagement and that interaction like? And I'm curious to know what sort of a community or conversation did it start to create to continue the conversation further?
Well, speaking for myself, the sustainability environment is a really welcoming and sharing community, and I've enjoyed being part of it for decades now. And really, it was an opportunity to reach out and say, hey, tell me about the work that you're doing, to a lot of people that we really admire. And so for me, it was a great excuse to be able to say, hey, we're doing this thing and we'd love to hear from you. And boy, were they generous with their time and their knowledge. Nick?
For me, these are people that I would never get a chance to talk to, probably. And, you know, Sharon had all these contacts and reached out, and that just shows that Sharon, you know, keeps close relationships and they really value her. And I got to reap the benefits of that. I got to hear all this information, and it just started a fire in my belly. I kept going to school just talking about it, talking about it. And other kids were like, wait a minute, why aren't we talking about this? And that opened a gateway for us to come to school and teach at Marana's materials class. And I think that students are eager. They want to learn this stuff, and they are our future.
That's super inspiring, because I think you're right. I think we can learn from the sins of our past, but I think we need the thought leadership of folks like you, Nick, that are leading forward and have some really incredible insights and passion to continue to carry that forward. And Sharon, through the process, I really appreciate you supporting Nick's passion, and as a firm, really kind of getting behind it. Obviously, it's a passion of yours as well. But I think for the future leaders and the future thinkers to be successful, I think they're going to need some of us to provide a bunch of tailwind and fill the sails, right? One of the things I've got one of the questions that have come up is what kind of doors has this opened, and how what kind of doors has it opened, and how have customers been open to this conversation? Because if it's a different process than maybe what would have existed normally, and there are extra steps to take, are you finding that is allowing you to have a different conversation with customers, manufacturers, people that you would be working with to create these spaces, and kind of what's the takeaway? Is there a demand for it, essentially? Because we can have passion for all the right reasons, but there also has to be a demand for that change to continue. So what are you hearing from your customers?
Well, with this current pandemic situation, it's a little hard to gauge the client piece of that right now. But the whole process has really reminded me of what we were doing 20 years ago with forest certification and picking the good wood. And the fact that we needed to generate, as you said, a demand for it or a market for it. And designers have a powerful voice. If designers go to manufacturers and suppliers and say, I want to know what your EPD is for this product because I'm comparing EPDs, and if your product doesn't have an EPD, then I'll go look for ones that do. And so I think we have, as designers, the power to move the marketplace through our actions. And our actions are requesting that kind of information until it's really available.
I think that's good. So we have one final question that I'd ask you, and you can both comment on this. Denise, Tom, Sarah added this question, so I want to make sure I call out names when I see them. But what are the top 1 or 2 things you would like us to take away from this presentation?
Well, that's an easy question. Thanks, Denise. The top thing that we'd like interior designers to take away from this is that this topic, as complex as it is, offers, in our case, 36 different opportunities to take the first step. And we hope that you'll use this report to take the first step and learn how to do this. If 20-something students in a San Jose State interiors class can pick materials using EPDs after one session and can actually submit their results using EPDs, then we as design community can also do that. So we hope we use this report in order to take the first step for yourself. Nick?
I hope that this inspires our future generations and students, and gets them out there and know that their voice will be heard if they speak up.
Well, I know that you, HPS as a whole firm, has been a delight to work with throughout this process. And Nick, as I said before, you were truly inspiring and from the word go. And we are just so proud that you were the first presenter of the Wonder Grant, and we hope you continue to push forward. And sustainability is such a critical thing. It's more important, I think, now more than ever. And we're so glad that firms like you are grabbing the mantle and leading the way. And I think there's a whole community of people that were on the call today that are behind you. And we look forward to future conversations and roundtables on this subject, because if we work together as a community, as a village, we can create change, and you guys have been a catalyst for that. So I want to thank you, Nick, and you, Sharon, for presenting today. I want to thank HPS for all the hard work, because while you're working on this, you're not working on other things that maybe pay the bills, and that type of investment is probably greater than the grant itself. But we're really proud that you presented this work, and the completed work is available on the website that Amy mentioned before. You can find it at the Wonder Grant microsite on our website. I also would like everybody to join us for our next presentation on the 2nd, and so there's some really exciting things from HPC, and then again from HGA, and just some really great work, very different bodies of work, but I think you'll all be inspired. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and for supporting such a great cause. And don't forget, the Wonder Grant will continue for 2020. We're doubling down on our commitment, and if you're in Sacramento, we want you to definitely take advantage of it. If you're in the North and East Bay counties that Amy mentioned, we want to give you access to it. We really started off with South Bay being kind of our pilot and our test, and we're really happy with the response that we got. So join us for our next Wonder Grant presentation. Make sure you jump out there. If you're an architecture and design firm and you're interested in receiving one of these grants, we want you to take note of that, and it is open and available to apply today. So thank you everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you all hopefully in person at some point in the near future.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.